listeners. Today is the first session of the OCA-WHV YOCA podcasting. So this is hosted by OCA-WHV.
OCA is this Asian American advocacy group that focuses on key issues and supporting them in legislature as well as other aspects of the United States. And we are the YOCA branch, meaning we are the youth, so we are all youth Asian Americans speaking out on key issues. And WHV stands for Westchester Hudson Valley, so it's a small branch of OCA.
So today is our first podcast, and we're going to be talking about the topic Asian American representation, actors, and media. First, let's go around in a circle and just introduce ourselves with our names. Okay, I'm Sophie.
I'm Emily.
I'm David.
I'm Ken.
I'm Anderson.
All right, so we're going to start with a little bit of historical context. Briefly just discuss the underrepresentation of Asian Americans in mainstream media. Would anybody like to start? All right, I can go. All right. Just going back to the first Asian portrayals in mainstream media in America, most Asian roles were played by white actors in yellowface, doing highly stereotypical and honestly quite racist portrayals of Asian characters. A lot of the times the women were hypersexualized and the men were made to look meek and docile, and that was sort of the norm of Asian representation in media.
Yeah, I have some examples here. For example, Hop Sing, he was in a TV show or a movie called Bonanza, and it was a character. It was a chef who barely spoke out for himself and was just told to do orders that like white people would tell him to do. Another example would be Charlie Chan. He's this cryptic detective, and it like shows the mysteriousness of Asian Americans. And the worst thing on top of that is like this Asian character was played by a Swedish American actor, who had slant eyes and had extensive makeup to be seen and to be viewed as Asian American. And the reason this white actor was used was because it was more marketable and versatile, according to the directors. And yeah.
Exactly. So even the Asian American characters weren't played by Asian Americans. They were just people who were posing as the stereotypical Asian Americans instead of who they actually were.
So going back to the nerdy issue, like these are all like stereotypical roles or viewpoints of Asian Americans. It's being seen as like the nerdy Asian in like in the friend group, because like through the minority, we're all seen as like smart, or we're all supposed to be smart, as well as the Dragon Lady, which is like the centralized version of like Asian women being seen as like mysterious and like exotic. I guess this also speaks to Orientalism, which is like the view of like seeing like Asia overall as exotic, sensual, and like mystical, while seeing the like American, like the Western part, as like rational, civilized, and scientific. And it just shows how like Asian Americans from the start have been seen as like foreign. Even even Asians that like moved to America and became Asian Americans, they're still viewed as foreign and not fully assimilated.
Exactly.
Something that I would say still holds true to this day to a certain degree.
Yeah, because like after all, we still look different, and so sometimes stereotypes might still hold in some people.
Right.
Okay, so the next part is when Asian American representation finally had some breakthroughs, and these roles are actually played by Asian Americans, and they persisted through challenges. Anyone want to add anything on that?
Right, so we spoke about how a lot of Asian roles were originally played by white actors, and when Asian actors started to actually get these roles, they were often made to act with a certain quote-unquote Asian accent, even if the actors themselves did not have one, just so they could fit the role somehow better. And nowadays, a lot of actors will refuse to do roles, or I guess at this point aren't even asked to do roles with accents. But a lot of famous actors have come out and said they regretted taking these roles, or they refused to do these roles as it was seen as demeaning or, yeah.
Yeah, so
I think that pop culture is also like swayed away, like Ken said, from these like stereotypical roles. Some examples would be like Crazy Rich Asians, where it's a film based solely on like Asians
in America.
Right.
in America and like their wealth, their influence, and it shows like Asians in power compared to like as a secondary character and being viewed as like weak and docile, similar to what the stereotypes hold for.
Exactly. So they were finally the main character of their story instead of just being like a sidekick or someone who helped the main character.
Right. And I'm not sure if you guys remember just how like groundbreaking that movie was when it came out. I don't exactly remember what year it was, but that was one of the first like blockbuster films with an all Asian cast, and just how remember like that was one of the first movies my whole family went together to go watch because we
Yeah.
kind of just had to. So
Came out in 2018, so that's entirely 5 years ago.
wow, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's so even though it's 5 years, that's still relatively recent, and it shows how like there's the whole like change aspect of the film industry to be more to be more diverse, to be more inclusive is a relatively like new phenomenon, and there's still more ground to be made in different areas to like sway away from like these stereotypical roles.
Yeah, just 3 years ago, well, 3 years after Crazy Rich Asians came out, Marvel made the movie about Shang-Chi, which was like with an Asian American as the main character, where before it was always these like white people.
I think Shang-Chi was interesting because like the kung fu thing was a stereotype, but like the director and like the actors were able to make that stereotype be a positive influence and like really like take ownership of it because like martial arts is like Shaolin martial arts is a big thing in China at least. And like they were able to like own up to the stereotype and like really like show how powerful and like yeah.
Right. And they made Shang-Chi, they made him more than just a guy who's good at martial arts.
Yeah,
He was actually like a full-fledged character. He had depth to him instead of, oh, he's the martial arts master that shows up when the main character like needs help to train and defeat the villain. Right.
Yeah.
He's his own character instead of just the stereotype of the martial arts master.
Yeah. So many of these Asian American actors also faced many challenges and stereotypes as they were trying to get these roles. Um, some examples might be the model minority myth. I think a while ago, the actor who played Shang-Chi said that his parents wanted him to become an accountant or a banker, and he had to push through these stereotypes to actually pursue a role that he was passionate about.
Right. There's that joke that I feel a lot of Asian American youth is would know. It's like be a doctor, lawyer, or like failure, you know. It's mostly a joke, but it still holds true to a certain extent where a lot of parents want you to get these more white collar, white well paying jobs, and the arts, like wanting to pursue arts is not as
Approved of.
approved
it's like
of,
looked down
yeah.
upon.
Which is a bit strange since like another stereotype about Asian Americans is that they're very good at piano, which is a type of art.
Yeah, a lot of parents will I feel like a lot of kids can relate to having to take like classical music lessons or art lessons throughout their youth, but
Even
actually
though-
wanting to pursue that as a career is
It's like forbidden or it's taboo.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
looked upon as well.
I think we should also like define the model minority myth for any listeners who are not
Right.
aware. It's a phenomenon. It's a sociological phenomenon about it's a stereotype that Asian Americans are successful, well-adjusted, and demonstrating that there's little or no need for social or economic assistance for the same or different minority groups, and that's from Wikipedia.
Right. And so this idea is another way of like othering Asians in America where it's like
You're separating them from the other minority groups.
we're still a minority group, but people will point to Asian Americans, be like, wow, look at how well they are adjusted. Why can't these other minorities, like, why aren't they doing as well?
Yeah, so that's like pitting the Asian Americans against other minority groups instead of letting them like work together.
Right.
Yeah, like I think there was a survey done at least like in the 70s or 80s by the Wall Street Journal, and the public consensus among like white Americans were that like Asian Americans do not face any discrimination or any backlash, simply because like they're so successful, and they would point to like statistics where Asian Americans get paid more than white Americans do, then being like, oh, it's clear that like they, because of their hard work, they're all hardworking and they're all successful. Other minorities groups should follow that instead of embracing their like, instead of embracing oppression and like stuff like that.
Right.
I think that's definitely harmful because like discrimination obviously still does occur in America. There's so many examples of like hate crimes being present. Like Vincent Chen, I think he's the first example where hate crime was nationally broadcast.
Exactly, especially since like COVID-19 came and people were like, this is the quote unquote China virus.
Thanks to our past president naming it the China virus or Wuhan virus, that added Kung flu.
Yeah.
We can laugh about it now, but these terms added a lot of hate, and it directed a lot of hate towards Asian American communities, more specifically Chinese communities, because that's where the disease originated.
Yeah, there was like a significant increase in hate crimes, especially during COVID. Like I think there was an example where like a 93-year-old old man was like pushed on the sidewalk simply because he was Asian American and was told to like go back to China. And like these hate crimes are still very present in the Asian American community, and it's important to like not disregard them just because statistically Asian Americans are more successful, because like we all still face discrimination.
Exactly. And these were probably just a portion of the challenges that these Asian American actors had to go through when they were trying to get that role or be able to portray the Asian American the way they felt that was right instead of just being a stereotypical Asian American.
So moving to a more positive note, we would like to speak to some of the recent success stories of Asian actors who have broken barriers and become more influential in the industry. Just off the top of my head, like Simu Liu, Michelle Yeoh. Is her name Michelle Yeoh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh. Just these like Hollywood stars. They're stars in their own right, and they happen to be Asian American as well. Just spreading.
Yeah, like Simu Liu's even being a Ken in the Barbie movie.
Right.
Like he's
Yeah.
managed to like get that role for himself and portray him as like as an actual person instead of just the Asian stereotype.
Right. Because even in his past role, like Shang-Chi, it was still like an Asian
It
role,
was still
kind
very
of.
stereotypical.
But now going into Barbie, he's being treated as just like an actor, not necessarily an Asian actor.
Yeah. And then yeah, I think Aquafina was one of the first Asian Americans to win the Golden Globe Award, I think.
We can double check that.
Yeah.
Let's double check that.
But another movie that also had a lot of representation and garnered a lot of success was Everything
Everywhere All at Once.
All at Once. I forgot. It's a hard name to say, but yeah, just that with almost an entirely Asian cast again, and with a lot of Mandarin dialogue, added more representation, and just it went into like family dynamics that I believe quite a lot of us in the community can relate to.
Yeah, and I think the most important part of an important part of the movie was like where it showed like the struggles of the Asian Americans in the United States, of like how they had to manage this like laundromat and how they were living in poverty, and it shows like going back to model minority, it shows like Asian Americans do struggle on a daily basis. Like not all Asian Americans are successful, and by viewing them as all successful, we ignore like systemic issues where like there are people who are living in poverty who need help and like need assistance, and they should not be ignored.
About our earlier question about Aquafina, yes, she did win it in 2020.
Yeah, so
There you go.
that's a success story.
Yeah, I think another like movie or example that just came to my mind is like Mulan.
Yeah.
The real life adaptation of it, like
Mhm.
real actors, and like that was all Asian.
Yeah,
It
it
had to be.
was.
And there was
Yeah.
also Nomadland. I
Right.
think the director was Chloe Zhao.
and it was pretty successful. Yeah, it was like
It was an indie film,
yeah, it was a
directed
pioneering
by
film.
Chloe Zhao.
And it was even nominated, and it won Academy Award for the Best Picture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's clear, like from our examples, like I said before, like all these examples are relatively recent, and it shows how like there is like new work being done, but there is always more to be done on top of these.
Right. And with these success stories, that isn't to say like, oh, there's no more issues, problem solved, like work done. Just because we have these success stories doesn't mean there aren't other aspiring actors per se that are struggling within the industry and maybe still struggling to get roles that are not offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to move on, so it's very important to have diverse voices, not just in front of the camera, like these actors that we've been talking about, but also the directors, the writers, and the producers, like Chloe Zhao, who we've just mentioned. Their perspectives can also change how the movie is like portrayed and how it's given to the audience to view. Anyone want to add anything to that?
Definitely the like having portrayal in front of the camera is something important, but you also need to have that perspective behind like directing the scenes or writing the story to have a like
A
how do
truly
I
authentic.
right an authentic or not non-offensive non-stereotypical like viewpoint of these portrayals.
Yeah, so like one example of this could be I guess like Bow, which we used just a while ago in our summer reading program. Guys, this is an ad now. You're welcome to drop in on summer reading. I think we have this every summer.
I don't think this is gonna be out in time.
Okay.
But next summer, when we have our summer reading program again, you're welcome to join.
Yeah, you guys are totally welcome to join. So Bao is actually directed by Domi Shi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. She's actually a Canadian film director, and she also directed Turning Red, which was one of the it was a very popular film a while
Right.
ago, I think. Yeah, and these films all discuss like the issues that many Asian parents and children face. Bao was about the issues that the parent felt when her child brought home someone that.
Well, yeah, it's a story about growing up where the mother wanted to protect her child as much as possible. She didn't really give him the freedom to like go play with friends because she was worried about him injuring himself. And then when he left, assuming after for school or whatever, and comes back with a girlfriend that he's gonna marry, like that's
that hasn't been introduced to the family. That's
right.
sort of like
What's going on here? Why? And then he wants to move out as well.
yeah,
The mother feels like the kid is basically like running away or like trying to leave her life. And
because in traditional Chinese culture, it's like you have to bring whoever it is back to your parents before anything else can happen.
Yeah, it's sort of like they have to pass the parents test,
right.
Exactly.
which is yeah.
And going back even further to like in China, when you would get married, you would move in with your family to one house. And I feel that sort of like wanting to live together is still something that lives on even to this day.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And so these stories can typically only be portrayed by someone who has truly experienced it, who knows what like the experience would be like. And so the fact that we had an Asian director behind these movies is really good, for lack of a better word.
right, they can fully show the like cultural nuances, something that maybe someone who's not of Chinese descent would not have been able to do if directing this movie.
Because it's like something the director has like lived his or her life like going through and like being surrounded by people who like also went through the experience, and just that deeper connection that like needs to be part of that group to understand
Right.
certain times.
Right.
Exactly. So for cultural authenticity, Anyone want to add anything about that? I know we touched on it when we talked about having an Asian director behind all of these films and like Asian actors. Anyone want to dive deeper on that?
Right. I think what we were just talking about actually segues well into this because having Asian actors or like directors, they can portray the cultural like
Experience.
experiences more authentically because they're a lot of the time pulling from their own lives and their own experiences, something that again a white director or actor may not be able to do. And so that just makes the portrayal and the acting more authentic.
Exactly. So if it was someone like mimicking the feeling of like an Asian American family or an experience, it would always feel sort of off because like
Right.
after all they truly haven't truly experienced it or haven't truly like been experiencing it ever since they were born. So.
Right. Like going back to Crazy Rich Asians, the whole plot where the two main characters are trying to get married and the mom of the um groom to be doesn't exactly approve. And that's something that is quite, I'd say, important to Chinese culture. It's where like the husband is usually the figurehead, like what he says goes, and the a son always has to listen to his mom. So in a lot of families, the grandma on the dad's side, basically, she's like the matriarch. What she says goes, and I think that's something that was portrayed very well in Crazy Rich Asians, and I think that has to do with the actors maybe understanding that experience and having that perspective that other actors might not have.
Yeah, that was probably part of what allowed Crazy Rich Asians to be just such a big hit, and for so many Asian Americans who watched it to truly like feel that connection with the
Right.
film.
Definitely.
David, Anderson, Emily, anything you guys want to add?
Actually, going back to the Crazy Rich Asian thing, there's the how do you pronounce this?
Filial piety.
Yeah, filial piety.
Yeah, it's like the attitude that like each like is spread through like Confucius about how there should be respect for parents and ancestors. I think that point was like well made because it is a deep ingrained custom in Asian American culture. I think that point was like deeply emphasized in Crazy Rich Asians, where like there is that respect for the parent. Like sometimes even if there's disagreeing viewpoints, the parent is always right, and that's like what leads to the respect of the parent and just like it is custom to live close to your parents even when you grow up.
Right.
And like having like your grandparents around you, it's just that like tight connection between families that is customary for Asian Americans that like nuance wouldn't like be brought up if like the actors were different or if that like if the director was different. So I think that's the need for representation.
Exactly.
Which transfers to our next portion, which is the call for change. So we'll be discussing like recent initiatives and movements. So the two that come to my mind are the Oscars So White and Representation Matters. And these all and like both of these push for greater diversity in Hollywood.
Yeah, so right now I'm just searching it up. So apparently it's when people were not happy that all of the acting nominations for the Oscars were all white. And so April Rain, I think, was the first to tweet the hashtag Oscars So White. And it started then trending online and sparked calls for inclusion of other minority groups in the Oscar.
And it's not just Asians. It also includes Black people and Hispanic people.
Yeah, it's like all of the minority
It's
groups.
like banding together to like show their exclusiveness from each other, as well as just like how it is important to have different viewpoints and different representation.
How
as
much
actors.
diversity is needed in Hollywood?
Yeah.
This popped into my mind when we were speaking about that, but like the BET Awards, which I believe stands for Black Entertainment and Television. I will double check that. But in 2015, like Sam Smith, a Caucasian man, won the award, which is kind of
strange to say.
yeah. This Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, definitely just like how an award is supposed to be given to like a minority and to show like the viewpoints that would otherwise not be seen in society, and how that was given to a common pop culture Caucasian man is interesting.
Right. So BET Awards, or Black Entertainment Television Award, is an award and a network actually to celebrate Black entertainers and other minorities in music and media as a whole.
But
And
funny
so
enough,
how that award goes to a Caucasian man is somewhat, I'd
on the
say,
strange side.
antithetical to what the
Yeah.
award is.
Yeah.
And so when even an award like that can be given to um
Not necessarily like Asian person.
or like a non-minority, this award is specifically to celebrate minorities in these places where they're often underrepresented. How this award can go to a white man, and just seeing like how the Oscars or like these other award shows, which I believe were started by white men, so it makes sense that in these places there's even more underrepresentation of minority groups such as Asian Americans or like Black entertainers.
Exactly.
I think like to like speak to like another issue is like it's not really an issue, but like speaking to like Asian Americans in particular, how like I remember we like talked about this before, how Asian Americans like parents as well wants their children to focus on like STEM or like science, medicine, or like math,
Right.
that those areas, and that also means that like a lot of talented Asian Americans who otherwise would have done like liberal, like something with the arts, so like acting, they wouldn't. So I think that's also a place um where there might be some conflicts, that like there also needs to be more actors as well, and these actors, so it's a twofold problem. So like there's a societal problem of like actors not getting the roles that like they deserve as Asian American actors, and there's also the problem of like the root problem, like of
The cultural issue.
cultural issue, yeah, of like how parents don't let their children go through these jobs because they're not like as secure as like being a
Right.
doctor, because you don't know when you're going to get your next role in a movie. You might never make that breakthrough, and like
Or when you like might finally succeed in Asian American terms instead of just being happy in whatever a career you chose to follow.
Definitely, because a lot of these parents, these immigrant parents, come from very tough backgrounds. A lot of them grew up on like farms. They were very not the most fortunate. So when they've come to America, I'm speaking from my own experience here. When they come to America, they want to create a better life for themselves and their children. And so when a child might take a more risky role, like becoming an actor, something that's not as secure, I think is the right word, as like becoming a doctor or lawyer or engineer. These are like jobs that are relatively secure and well paying versus taking a chance on becoming an artist. I think the parents want, it's more of like a worry that you won't live like a good life in their eyes, versus maybe becoming an artist is more fulfilling for the child, but that's not necessarily something that the parents, I guess,
approve of, because
approve
it's
of.
like not realistic.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like the parents went through all that risk of like taking like the hardship of coming to the United States, so that like their children are like, we could have a better future and could have a more
Right.
secure like place, because and like more upward mobility, I guess.
Definitely.
And just being in that, like taking on like a risky, like Ken said, unsecure positions, definitely.
Exactly.
They would
So
not
now
support
let's
that.
just like conclude this podcast for the listeners. So Asian American representation has definitely come a long way in Hollywood and the media. At first, the stereotypical roles were played by non-Asian actors, but now the roles Asian actors are able to play aren't necessarily stereotypical, and they can choose their own roles, like Simu Liu and Barbie.
Right. And with more representation behind the camera as well, it opens up the opportunity to create more inclusive roles for these Asian American actors.
Exactly.
And like all of this helps goes against the stereotypes or the perceptions of Asian Americans we first talked about in the beginning of the podcast, as seeing them as like weak and like docile, and
or the mystical martial arts master, or the hypersexualized like ninja woman.
Yeah,
Exactly.
If you can't see me, I'm doing like funny little hand gestures, but yeah,
there's definitely still change being made, and it's just being aware and informed about the challenges of Asian Americans, and I think that's what our podcast will speak about in the coming weeks, about like showing and highlighting key issues of Asian Americans and what we can do to help solve them. So like the call to change of like the current initiative and movements of like the Oscars So White and Representation Matters, and just supporting these Asian American films.
Exactly.
For giving them a chance.
So thank you guys for joining us in this conversation on Asian American representation, and we will continue exploring the important diversity topics in future episodes.
I believe next week we are tackling
mental health
and related stigmas around that topic. So thank you guys so much for listening, and
please listen
like and
again.
subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Okay.